Hello, everyone. This is Bentley from Kent, Washington. Uh, Today we're going to start with some rainbows, but then we're going to move to a bunch of new fish in the fish room. First, let me apologize. This came out a little later than I wanted to. I wanted it to come out Monday, but I just got a little busy and kind of didn't get as much time for editing as I thought I was going to have. So, uh, hence why it's coming out in the middle of the week. Anyway, these are the Chilatharina fasciata from Ungulum rainbows that I got from Gary Lang. He calls them the chameleon rainbow. And as you'll notice, normally they're just kind of a silver fish with little blue fins last time I've shot them. We actually sat our camera. My roommate is finally back, so I've got a lot of help from him. Got to sit a DSLR on top of our dehumidifier with no one in the room and catch their spawning behavior. So you actually get to see these males coloring up. And if you look here, you can see like get kind of a goldy brass color, gunmetal, silver, blue. And as they sit and flick, you'll see green and pink iridescences and the red tones toward the tail right by the fins. Just tons and tons of color from normally what just seems like a boring silvery white fish with a little blue in the fins. This is why Gary Lang calls these things chameleon rainbows. And I mentioned these in Jimmy's video, and this is an opportunity we finally got it on camera to show you guys. And you can see the males, they'll keep tilting themselves and kind of twitching, showing that kind of head stripe of theirs to the females, trying to entice them toward the spawning mop. I've been conditioning them to get used to the spawning mop, and you'll notice that they always try to approach the females and lure them to that spawning mop. There's tons of other plants in this tank. Not as much as some of my other tanks, but there's still lots of plants, but they always take them to that spawning mop. That's an important part of conditioning rainbows for breeding, is getting them super used to a spawning mop, getting used to the time that they like to spawn in the day. Every rainbow is a little different. Bosemani rainbows almost always shortly after your lights have come on in the morning and they've had their first feeding. That's when they're going to go. These Chilatharina tend to be a little later in the day, like, you know, the lights have been on for 4 or 5 hours, something like noon, maybe 1 o'clock, maybe as early as like 10:30 to 11. But a little later, that's when they start doing their thing. And you can see these two males trying to entice these two females, and just kind of watch their behavior. Look at how the colors shift, because you get to watch the way that rainbows work in live time here, seeing how the colors shift on their bodies and why they're called rainbow fish. Just because there's this constant array of ever changing color, and you got all these different colors on a fish that sometimes just looks super boring for most people. I personally find them quite beautiful, but I've got a bias, right? I love rainbow fish, so I'm going to be a little biased toward them. So you can see they're constantly kind of chasing the girls around, trying to kind of corral or entice them toward the mop. And you'll see like this girl comes back over here, and almost immediately the males start darting back over. They're lighting their foreheads up. They're sitting there twitching and displaying in front of the girls, showing all their colors, trying to entice them. This is really good young adult rainbow breeding behavior here and courting behavior, which it's really fun to watch because it's kind of unique in how rainbows really work and show their colors and their displays. Now, as they get older, these males are going to get more of that color permanently, and when they do go into their spawning behavior, they will exhibit even more colors, and they'll shift more drastically between those colors than they do as young adults, which is going to be insane to watch. And you guys will get to see that once they get there, but it's going to be a little while. So here you can see they go up into the mop, and the two boys are kind of making it hard for each other as they're kind of overwhelming the female, and she's kind of darting off, trying to get alone where it's just one male and herself. But some rainbows will spawn outside the mop, some will spawn at the very top, some will actually go up into the mop like these guys are, the ungulums here. You can see right here, they see their tails wiggling and shaking as they shake against each other, and then the male will release his milt, and the female sprays her eggs into the water, and that's that. Now you have fertilized rainbow eggs in that mop. If you're ever going to breed them, pull that mop as soon as you can, get those eggs out, move them to a container where they're safe, and go from there. So let's do new fish. You guys probably recognize these. So these are some wonderful, wonderful Neolamprologus multifasciatus, or multis, or shellies. These are shell-dwelling cichlids from Lake Tanganyika. You're probably going to be like, wait, didn't you just have all those go to your buddy Brad? Yes, I did. But the Geilers are a local club member who are going to be moving out of state, and they can't take their fish room with them. And this is one of the fish that they bred a ton of. This is actually where my Shelleys originally came from. And I got them as young, and they grew up to adults, and then had their own young, all that kind of stuff. Well, they had a bunch of these. And they were having trouble finding a home for them. And I spoke up because I still had left my tank together. While I didn't have the shells, I was still doing water changes on it. The filter was still running on it. It was still heated, still had the aragonite sand, so it's good higher pH. So I just had a system ready. And as we get these kind of close-up shots and try to like manually focus our camera here, you can see like the yellow in their fins and those brilliant blue eyes and all the stripes. Just these are such a beautiful fish. They're so interesting. And I didn't think I was going to keep them again. I thought I was going to turn this into another plant growing tank to do, kind of expand my plants for profit stuff and show you guys some other plants and maybe some other tips and stuff in a different tank and kind of go a different route, like show you another way to do plants for profit than specifically just stems. But when you get this many Shelleys, it's hard to say no. And plus, I do find them really interesting. They're really cool fish, but my buddy Brad really, really wanted to go nuts, and he was more interested in breeding them than I was. So that's why they went originally, but the Gaylors couldn't find anybody to take them really. No one was expressing interest, so I just said, hey, I've still got my setup. I've got a 40 breeder with an AquaClear 110 filtering it. It's still heated from everything. And there had actually been one teeny tiny baby that somehow survived as an egg and hatched and was in this tank alone, which is why that little PVC elbow is there. And since then, we've added a bunch of PVC caves. So no shells this time. So when I do further footage, you're going to see the PVC approach. I mentioned in the How to Basics video of to shell or not to shell, kind of like, do you use shells or do you use PVC? This time you're going to see it with PVC instead of shells. As you zoom out here, you can see just how many of these guys I got. They had a ton. They actively breed them. They're phenomenal breeders. They have tons of other fish, and we're going to see the other major fish that came into the fish room here shortly. But this is kind of breaking that. I'm not going to get any new fish. However, these were given to me, so I did not pay for these. They were free. I'm basically just rehoming them for a club member, which is an incredible amount of generosity. I will fully admit that. But at the same time, they couldn't find a home and they didn't want them to just die. And I'm a big softie, and I had kind of slacked on tearing this tank down and turning into something else. And I guess as fate would have it, that means that these wonderful little guys are back in my fish room. So one final shot before we switch to the next fish. I'm going to show you the long way through the tank. So check this out. The one thing that I love about these fish is how much attention they will pay to us as people. So notice they kind of duck away, and then all of a sudden they all turn and look at you and pay attention to you. It's super neat behavior. Anyway, let's go to the next one. I had a whole ton of plecos. And before we talk plecos, I want you to pay attention. Almost dead center of the screen, there's a baby Florida flagfish. I'd mentioned this in the video with Jimmy as well. Ever since all these plecos got in this tank in their quarantine system, this guy has been super upfront and active and very visible. Normally he's hiding in back and hiding between the plants or back behind the sponge or something like that. He's been front and center the whole time, which is kind of cool. I got an opportunity to finally film this little guy, or gal. I'm not sure whether I can't sex it at this point, but these plecos are all green dragon bloodlines, some short fin, some long fin, from Greg Sage originally. So the Geilers got these from Greg Sage. And yes, even those albino bristle noses in there are albino green dragons. So if you pay attention, you'll see on the albinos the little white corners to their tail fin that is the same in the normal colored green dragons. Now, most of these are supposed to be long fin. Some have shorter fins than others. It's just kind of how things happen. But you'll see in a little bit one of the older ones the older ones have been really shy, where the young ones have not been shy at all. but one of the older ones that has just absolutely beautiful super long fins will come out. And that's how eventually how some of these will grow up. They'll start getting more and more length in their fins as they get a little older. Um, but not all of them. There's a few short fins mixed in here. It just kind of happens. But I think it's something like 20 or so plecos in here, and they're going to be in quarantine. And since we moved them in, we've added an extra sponge. So there's 2 sponges in this tank. We're feeding them some rapashi and some green beans, a zucchini, stuff like that. Just all your usual pleco fare. And this little flagfish has been so active all of a sudden, other than hiding a ton, unless it was water change day. So I actually got a real good opportunity to film this little guy. More specifically, my roommate did this filming for me actually because I was pretty busy over the weekend. The past weekend, I was running all over the place after spending most of a day picking these fish up. So now here you can see one of the bigger ones is slowly starting to come forward away from the sponge. And you'll just get to see, like, as they get older, those long, beautiful fins that you expect of the longfin green dragons. These guys are all going to take plenty of time to grow up. They're teeny tiny for the most part, with a few exceptions. But it's something cool. It's in the fish room. The Geilers are incredible breeders. They're incredibly wonderful people. And after they move, I'm sure they'll get back to doing breeding like they did before. You can actually buy fish from them when they get back to doing it. They are under Geiler Aquatics. That's Geiler Aquatics on Aquabid. If you check it out, they got fantastic customer service oriented approach. They take really great care of their fish. They have like the most insanely amazing feeding regime of live foods I've ever seen in someone. And at some point we'll have to go over that. But I just wanted to show you some new fish. I kind of broke my rule, but when things are given to you free and you're rehoming them to help a club member, you get to break the rules, right? So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.